I thought I was done with Halloween forever. For years, I refused to open the door, refused to decorate, refused to pretend this night was about fun or candy. Too many memories, too much guilt. But this year, something pulled me back. I was driving home after a long shift when I saw her. A little girl standing under a flickering streetlight, wearing a cracked porcelain mask and holding a pumpkin bucket. She didn't move when I slowed down, didn't speak, until I called out. Her voice was soft, trembling, almost pleading. "Help me find my home." Then, in the blink of an eye, she was gone. Just vanished, leaving behind a trail of small, wet footprints leading into the woods. And before I could stop myself, I followed. Because something deep inside me whispered, this wasn't the first Halloween she'd been waiting for help. Halloween night had always been the hardest for Ethan. Every pumpkin on a porch, every child's laughter echoing through the streets felt like a cruel reminder of what he'd lost. 5 years had passed since the accident that took his little sister, Lily, but the memory was still as sharp as the night air. He'd buried himself in work as a paramedic, saving strangers to quiet the voice that whispered he hadn't saved her. That evening, the town looked almost peaceful. Orange lights glowing on porches, leaves swirling in gusts of wind, and the faint echo of children yelling, "Trick or treat." In the distance, Ethan drove slowly down Hollow Street, the same street where it had all happened. He told himself it was just a shortcut home, but deep down he knew it was something else, a pull, a memory that refused to rest. As his ambulance rolled past an intersection, something caught his eye. Under a flickering streetlight stood a little girl. Her costume looked oddly old-fashioned, a tattered white dress that brushed her knees, dirt smudging the fabric, and a cracked porcelain mask hiding her face. She clutched a small pumpkin bucket in one hand, completely still, as if waiting for someone. Ethan frowned. It was nearly midnight, too late for a kid to be out alone. He slowed the vehicle, the tires crunching over fallen leaves, and rolled down his window. "Hey, sweetheart," he called gently, his professional instinct taking over. "Are you lost?" The girl didn't answer. She tilted her head slightly, and the mask caught the streetlight just enough for him to see her lips move. Her voice was faint, barely carried by the wind. "Help me find my home." Ethan blinked. The word sent a chill crawling down his spine. He stepped out of the vehicle, but before he could take a step toward her, she was gone, just gone. The space where she'd stood was empty, the air disturbingly still. Ethan looked around, scanning the yards, the trees, the parked cars. Nothing. Only silence and the soft hum of the streetlight buzzing above. Then he noticed it, a trail of tiny, wet footprints glistening on the asphalt. They led away from the streetlight, weaving toward the woods behind the houses. His chest tightened. Logic told him to get back in the ambulance and call it in. But something deeper, guilt, maybe instinct, pushed him to follow. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped into the fog. Each footstep crunched over damp leaves. The air grew colder, heavier. The sounds of the neighborhood faded until all that remained was the distant rustle of wind through bare branches. As he moved deeper into the mist, a memory flashed, Lily's laughter that last Halloween, the way she'd begged him to take her trick-or-treating. He'd promised to pick her up after work. He never got the chance. Now, following those small footprints into the dark, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that somehow the night was giving him one. The deeper Ethan went, the quieter the world became. The cheerful sounds of Halloween, laughter, distant music, the rustle of candy wrappers, all faded behind him until there was only the crunch of his boots and the whisper of wind through the trees. His flashlight beam trembled slightly as he scanned the mist ahead, heart pounding with that uneasy rhythm only true silence brings. The footprints were still there, small, wet, perfectly spaced. They led him along a narrow dirt path lined with crooked trees that leaned toward him like they were listening. Every few steps he caught flickers of movement in the fog, the twitch of fabric, the glimmer of something pale. But when he turned the light, nothing was there. He told himself it was his mind playing tricks. He'd been working too many night shifts, not sleeping enough. But then he saw it, a small square of paper lying in the dirt. He bent down, brushing away the leaves. It was a Polaroid photo. The image showed a group of children dressed for Halloween, superheroes, witches, a clown. They stood in front of a row of familiar suburban houses, their smiles frozen in time. The colors were faded, the edges curled with age. On the back, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "Still waiting to go home." A chill spread through Ethan's body. He turned slowly, scanning the trees. Another Polaroid fluttered down from a branch, landing near his foot. Then another and another, until a trail of them stretched deeper into the woods. He picked one up. This time it wasn't just any child. It was Lily. She was smiling in her pumpkin costume, holding the same candy bucket she'd been carrying the night she died. Ethan's throat tightened. He hadn't seen that photo since the accident. He'd thought it was gone forever. "Lily?" He whispered into the fog, his voice breaking. A faint sound answered him. The creak of metal, slow and rhythmic, like a swing swaying in the distance. Ethan followed the noise, stepping cautiously between the trees until the woods opened into a small clearing. At its center stood an old playground, half buried beneath fallen leaves. Rusted swings groaned in the wind, a broken slide leaned against a crooked pole, and a carousel sat still under a veil of mist. On one of the swings sat the masked girl. She swayed gently, her cracked porcelain face turned toward the ground. Ethan's flashlight flickered. He took a cautious step forward. "Why are you showing me this?" he asked, voice low, trembling. The girl lifted her head. The mask shifted just enough for the light to catch the hollow sockets behind it. But for a moment, just a moment, he swore he saw Lily's eyes looking back at him. Her whisper was soft, carried by the cold air. They never stopped trick-or-treating. The wind rose suddenly, scattering the Polaroids through the clearing. Ethan turned and froze. From the mist behind the swings, dozens of children began to emerge. Pale, silent, their faces blank but peaceful. Each held a pumpkin bucket, some half filled with candy that looked years old. They surrounded him in stillness, waiting. And in that instant, Ethan realized. These woods remembered everyone who never made it home. The ghostly children stood motionless, their pale faces glowing faintly in the cold light of the moon. Ethan's breath fogged in the air as he turned in slow circles, his flashlight sweeping across a sea of hollow eyes and still bodies. None of them spoke, yet he could feel their presence pressing in around him, heavy, expectant, as if they had been waiting for years. Then the masked girl, the one who had first appeared under the streetlight, stepped forward. Her small hand reached for his, and though her skin was cold as ice, he didn't pull away. She raised her arm and pointed through the trees, toward a faint orange glow flickering beyond the fog. Ethan followed her gaze. It was a porch light. His heart stuttered. He knew that light. The color, the soft hum. He had seen it every night in his nightmares. "No," he whispered. But the girl only nodded once, gently tugging at his hand. They began walking. The crowd of children followed silently, their footsteps whispering against the leaves. The closer they got, the more the world seemed to decay around them. Pumpkins on the ground had rotted into black slush. Candy wrappers hung from branches like faded ornaments. The air itself seemed thicker, heavier with memories. When they broke through the trees, Ethan froze. There it was, the house where Lily had died. The old two-story home stood on the corner of Hollow Street, its porch still wrapped in sagging Halloween decorations. Cobwebs gray with dust, faded paper bats, a cracked plastic skeleton hanging from a nail. The porch light flickered weakly, struggling against the fog. He hadn't been back here since that night. The masked girl walked up the steps first, then turned to look back at him. Her porcelain mask glinted under the trembling light. "She's waiting," she said softly. Ethan's heart pounded as he stepped onto the porch. The floorboards groaned beneath his boots. When he pushed open the door, it swung inward without a sound, like it had been expecting him. The inside smelled of dust and rain-soaked wood. Candy wrappers littered the floor, and a faint echo of laughter drifted through the halls, laughter that faded just as he tried to place it. On the fireplace mantel sat a single candle, burning low. Beside it was a framed photo, Lily dressed in her pumpkin costume, grinning with her missing front teeth. Ethan's throat tightened. "Lily!" The masked girl stood by the photo, her head tilted slightly. "You couldn't save her then," she said, "but you can help them now." As her voice faded, the room began to whisper. Children's names filled the air, murmured like prayers, voices overlapping in soft, ghostly tones. Ethan turned, and the spectral children were standing inside the house now, their eyes glowing faintly. Each one seemed to be waiting for something. Then Ethan understood. They weren't here to haunt him. They were here because they couldn't move on, and somehow, Lily had brought him here to set them free. The candle on the mantel flickered violently, casting long, restless shadows across the walls. The temperature dropped so fast Ethan could see his own breath. The air in the house grew heavy, charged, almost electric. The children huddled together, their pale faces turned toward the front door. Even the masked girl stepped back, clutching her pumpkin bucket tightly. Ethan's pulse quickened. Something was coming. He could feel it before he saw it, the vibration in the floorboards, the low hum that seemed to echo inside his chest. Then from the darkness beyond the open doorway, a shape began to form. At first it was only a silhouette. Tall, thin, its limbs unnaturally long. A faint gleam reflected off a driver's cap on its head, and when the porch light outside flickered again, the figure stepped fully into view. It was the man who had killed Lily, or rather, the thing that wore his shadow. Ethan's breath hitched. He wanted to move, to back away, but his feet refused to obey. The figure's presence filled the room like smoke, thick and suffocating. When it spoke, its voice wasn't a voice at all. It was a blend of whispers echoing from every corner of the house. You couldn't save her. Ethan flinched, the words slicing deep. His flashlight dimmed, the batteries dying, leaving the faint candle as the only light between them. I tried, he said, his voice trembling but steady. I tried to get there. The shadow tilted its head. You were too late then. You'll be too late now. Behind Ethan, the children whimpered. The masked girl clung to his sleeve. They can't leave, she whispered. It keeps them here. Ethan turned toward the candle, the small flickering flame beside Lily's photo. Something inside him shifted. Maybe it was guilt, maybe love, maybe both. But for the first time in years, he stopped running from it. He picked up the candle, holding it in both hands like something sacred. Not tonight, he said. The shadow surged forward, the air exploding with cold wind. The lights burst, the windows rattled, and the candle nearly went out. But Ethan held firm. He stepped between the children and the darkness, his voice steady despite the shaking in his body. You've taken enough, he said. You don't get them too. The figure screamed, a shriek that didn't come from any human throat. The room twisted, the walls seemed to bend inward, and for a moment the world became nothing but light and shadow locked in battle. Ethan took one final step forward, thrusting the candle toward the figure. The flame flared, burning impossibly bright, a flash of gold that filled the room with warmth. The shadow recoiled, dissolving into smoke and ash. One by one, the ghostly children began to fade too, but their faces were calm now, peaceful. They dropped their pumpkin buckets, each glowing softly before vanishing like fireflies. The masked girl turned to Ethan, her voice barely above a whisper. You did it. And then she smiled, in a soft, familiar smile. For the first time, Ethan realized she wasn't just any spirit. She was Lily. She stepped closer, light spilling from her small form. It's time to go home, Ethan. The candle's flame dimmed, and everything went still. The world was quiet when Ethan opened his eyes. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. The air smelled of wet leaves and cold metal, the kind of scent that clings to the earth after a storm. His head rested against the steering wheel of his ambulance parked on the side of Hollow Street. The radio buzzed softly with static. Morning sunlight filtered through the windshield, cutting through the mist that still clung to the road. Had it all been a dream? Ethan sat up slowly, his neck stiff, heart still pounding. Everything looked normal. Children's decorations fluttering in the breeze, a few forgotten candy wrappers glinting on lawns, the same street he'd driven 1,000 times. But something felt lighter. The air didn't carry that suffocating weight anymore. The silence wasn't empty. It was peaceful. Then he saw it. On the passenger seat beside him sat a small pumpkin bucket, the same kind his sister Lily had carried the night she died. Ethan froze. The handle was damp with dew, and inside the bucket were the old Polaroid photos, the same ones he'd seen scattered in the woods. Only now they were different. The faces of the children weren't pale or frightened anymore. They were smiling, standing in bright daylight, their costumes vibrant and full of color. At the bottom of the bucket lay one last photo. Lily, beaming, arms full of candy, the morning sun glowing behind her. On the back, written in a child's uneven scrawl, were 5 simple words. "Thank you for coming back." Ethan's vision blurred as tears welled up in his eyes. He ran his thumb gently over the handwriting, his heart breaking and healing at the same time. Outside, a soft breeze swept through the trees, carrying the faintest sound: laughter. Children's laughter, not eerie this time, but light and full of life. Across the street, he thought he saw a little girl standing by a mailbox. She wore a white dress and a porcelain mask, though now it was unbroken. She lifted a hand and waved. Ethan blinked. She was gone. Only the morning fog remained. He sat there for a long moment, breathing, feeling something he hadn't felt in years: peace. Then he started the engine and drove slowly through the waking neighborhood. Halloween was over, but it had left behind something more than candy wrappers and fake cobwebs. It had left closure. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, Ethan parked the ambulance at the town center. He'd volunteered to organize a new Halloween safety patrol, making sure no child ever vanished on this night again. Parents smiled, kids ran past with laughter in their voices, and porch lights flickered on one by one. As the first jack-o'-lanterns began to glow, a soft whisper brushed against the back of Ethan's mind, familiar, warm, and full of love. "You helped us find our way home." He smiled quietly, looking up at the sky now streaked with orange and violet. Somewhere in that fading light he could almost see Lily, free, happy, waving goodbye. And as the wind carried through Hollow Street, the porch lights flickered once, then steadied. Sometimes the scariest nights lead us back to the light.